Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another budget video update here. I hope you're enjoying your spring break as we put the finishing touches on the 2019-2020 Rome City School District budget. As we go through this presentation, I hope to give you a true budget presentation, including what the tax impact might be on the community relative to the school district budget for next year. So to start off, just looking at some of our facts, this slide has not changed in the past month. Our current enrollment still under 6,000 barely. You can see our total expenses per pupil is just under $21,000. There's some detail on here about how we rank relative to the rest of the state on that. Currently, we rank 581 out of 669 New York State public school districts. Other important factors to know about when we talk about our school district budget is our combined wealth ratio, and that number is a 0.394, and we've talked about this a lot. But this combined wealth ratio is the average wealth of our school population, and a 1.0 is an average wealth for a district community, and 0.7 is the average combined wealth ratio of New York State small city school districts. So you can see where Rome ranks relative to the rest of the state. On average, our community is considered to be much more impoverished than many of the other small cities within the state. 96% of our budget is a fixed cost budget, meaning that we don't really control the expenditures of those lines. Those are things that are contractually related obligations relative to other agreements that we might have. And if you look at the number, roughly $4.5 million of our budget is what you would consider a controllable expense. Last factors on the slide, just we have 4 schools identified under ESSA, which we've talked about in the past, and our allowable contingent tax levy is $33,787,901. That contingent number is something we'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the presentation. Last thing I want to highlight is just our completer rate for Rome Free Academy is just over 82%, and that number is important because the completer rate talks about the percentage of students that enter high school as a freshman and leave within 4 years. Moving through some positives relative to the school district, just want to show you some academic achievements that we've had. This slide, you can see the data on your own. I just highlighted our completer rate. Above that, though, almost 90% of our students are completing with a Regents diploma, which is a fantastic number. All of our statistics relative to graduation rates and completer rates continue to climb here within the school district. Along with our academic achievements, some of our fine arts achievements from last year till now, once again, Rome was named a Best Community for Music Education for 2019. You can see our number of students participating in our fine arts programs is growing year over year. We are one of the only school districts that does a public art show throughout the community throughout the springtime, so I thank our art faculty for doing that and for our students who participate. You can see a lot of accolades here in the music programs and just some of the numbers for our students relative to their participation in extracurricular fine arts programs. Finally, I want to just highlight some of our athletic accomplishments over the past year. Again, the slide breaks down the numbers for you. You can see the number of student athletes and teams receiving Scholar Athlete Awards, both the Scholar Team Award and the Individual Scholar Athlete Award. Those are for students and teams who achieve an overall cumulative GPA of 90% or higher. Those numbers continue to climb year over year, which means our student athletes are performing not just on the competitive arena, but in the classroom as well. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more sectional championships, state championship participations, and league championship awards coming into our athletic program. So congratulations to all of our athletes, as well as our coaches and families out there who support our athletic programs to receive these wonderful accolades. Moving into the actual budget development, again, I want to look at some of the challenges and responses for this year. This slide, again, is very much the same as it has been the past several months. The challenges continue to be state aid, the underfunded mandates that we have, uncertainties relative to the federal government at this point in time. The Average Student Succeeds Act brings with it a host of responsibilities financially that are not accounted for in revenue sources. This year, we do still have declining revenue. Our revenue sources continue to be a challenge, along with the concept of fixed cost budgeting. We are living within a new normal, which is what can we do to keep our programs and keep our people while working within less revenue. So all these challenges continue to face us each and every year. They're not going to change much year over year as the list of mandates continues to grow relative to our responsibilities as a school district and a school system. Without the revenue streams coming in to match that, it makes it challenging. An estimated revenue slide here. This has changed a little bit from last month. On the real property tax line, we have estimated the difference in revenue relative to property taxes for the year. And you will also see in the basic formula aid line, there is a significant increase there. And that attributes for an additional $1.5 million in foundation aid. That was a result of the acted legislative budget last month. So overall, when you look through this slide, you can see our estimated revenues are up slightly from the last presentation, about $3 million up, and that's a combination of property taxes and foundation aid increase. The total difference year over year, our revenue is still slightly declined from this current year till next year's proposed. Almost $2 million down in revenue, however, still significantly better than a month ago. Historical revenue sources, this slide just shows a graphical organizer of kind of where our revenues come from. You can see that we are becoming more and more reliant on state aid. As I mentioned before, with state aid declining in percentage of funding, it is going to be a challenge moving forward on any community. It looks like that the taxpayers, unfortunately, on the communities are going to be responsible for shouldering the revenue. Knowing that our revenues continue to decline a little bit, and we talked about that last slide, our proposed budget for the 2019-2020 school year is $116,692,438. This figure is slightly increased from the presentation a few weeks ago, and that's simply due to the increased foundation aid expected from the executive budget that was enacted. Due to that increase, without increasing the top dollar line of the budget amount, we would be running the risk of being terribly close to spending the actual budget amount. By law, we cannot overspend the adopted budget. We can underspend it, but we can't overspend it. So that this number has increased slightly just to accommodate that increased aid, to make sure that we stay within our legal requirements for expenditure of the budget. You can see the proposed expenditures by type in this category. Some slight changes here to accommodate that $116 million number. The largest increase is in the instruction line. Almost all of the $1.5 million that came in through the foundation aid increase were plugged right into increasing people in our classrooms. So you can see the differences here year over year, as well as some of the information within the different categories as to what the categories balance out. Overall, we have a decrease of roughly 1% in total expenditures year over year in the 2019-2020 proposed budget. Historical summary of our budgets year over year. On this slide, we're talking about the different codes where the things come out. You can see just how they fluctuate from year to year. Realistically, our payroll codes and our benefit codes are our largest chunk of all of our budget. And essentially, that's anywhere you go, any company or business you talk to, your people are the largest percentage of any budget that you operate. So in this case, we're looking at payroll and benefits. You can see that they're down. The payroll is down slightly from the current year budget to next year's proposed. However, benefits continue to be projected as an increase. The only thing on here that looks a little bit out of ordinary for someone just looking at numbers, if you notice the 9900 codes to transfer to other funds, the significant decrease in that number is simply related to the elimination of the pre-K special ed programming, and that's where most of that money would show up within a budget. The next slide simply shows our expenditures per pupil. Again, this is something we show each and every year. These are the school districts within Oneida County and those in Madison County that fall within the Madison-Oneida BOCES. A few years ago, we were letter J on this chart, and now we are letter N. So we're continuing to decrease our expenditures per pupil, which is a positive relative to demonstrating the ability to equitably spend our funds and manage our funds in a way that is fiscally responsible to our community and our taxpayers. So we continue to move in a better direction relative to expenditures per pupil, and hopefully in the coming years we're closer to that letter T category within this particular slide. The next thing I want to talk about is the process of balancing the budget. By law in New York State, school districts are required to present a balanced budget to the public for vote. This is a unique law to public school districts. It's not required of municipalities or government. They provide you with a spending plan that communities don't vote on. School districts, however, have to present both a spending plan, which is our expenditure budget, as well as a revenue budget that matches those two categories. So in balancing the budget this year, one of the things we had to look at, as you know, are significant reductions in many areas. This slide shows the current proposed reductions that are still out of this budget in order to make sure that our revenues and our expenditures balance and match. You can see in total there's 42 teaching positions. That's a combination of all of our elementary positions and secondary positions on the table, regardless of what they do. Our instructional coaches and teachers on special assignment positions, administration, and other support staff. In total, when you look at the staff numbers, you have 62 positions on that listing there. The rest of these things are relative to our pre-K transportation, special education programming, and pre-K, our contracts that we have with different organizations in the community, as well as some other things like our field trips, equipment, supply lines, things of that nature. In total, our reduced expenditures are roughly $7 million in helping to balance the budget. Another piece of balance in the budget, obviously, is the local effort and the tax cap. So tax cap formula, this is a slide we show every year just to kind of show the community some of the craziness that happens in Albany relative to school funding and finance. These are all the different factors that get plugged into the tax cap formula. When you plug all that information in, you'll find that Rome for this year has a tax cap allowable of 4.06%. The next slide shows a little bit of our analysis of our tax cap the past 6 years. This year we are proposing a tax of 4.06%, which is our cap, taxing to the cap this year to try to generate as much revenue as we can. Last month we were proposing 3.96%, so this is a slight increase of 0.1% from presentation to presentation. The dollar amount total in that is roughly $27,000 difference in total. But you can see over the past 6 years our taxing relative to the cap. Cumulatively, we've been just over $1 million less than we could have collected, but aggregate in total the past 6 years we've left almost $7.5 million in tax revenue on the table that we have not collected, which could have significantly benefited our shortfalls relative to our revenues. So in whole, we are doing a decent job relative to collecting taxes. I know that nobody wants to talk about taxes, and we certainly don't want to have to be the ones at the table recommending this. However, when the state aid numbers are not keeping up with where the formulas are suggesting they should be, we're the ones left having to make sure that we can operate a program for our children. So our proposed tax levy for next year, as I just mentioned, is 4.06%. This is a difference of $1,373,330 for a total proposed levy of $35,161,231. Things that impact your individual tax rates are your state and federal aids. We know the state aid, the federal aid relative to title programming could change this a little bit. We don't get those numbers until August. The assessor's office, which the school district has no control over, but changes in your assessments, equalization rates at the STAR exemptions also could make a difference relative to your individual tax rate for your property. Things that are important to know, useful websites relative to tax rate and property taxes are listed on the slide. If you want to do some more homework on those things, you're more than welcome to visit our website, and these will be linked up there through the presentation that you could check those websites out and learn more about property tax as it relates to school taxes. In our 5 municipalities, the next slide shows our our projected tax rates for $1,000 of assessed valuation in the 5 municipalities. So Rome, Ansville, Lee, Verona, and Western, you can see the actual tax rates for this year and the projected tax rates for next year. If you take the equalization rate and you multiply that versus the projected tax rate, you get what is called the tax on true, and you will find that each of the 5 municipalities have an equivalent tax on true. The change in rate for each municipality and then the percent of our tax base that is covered by each municipality for the school district is shown here. How this proposed tax rate looks on a home in the city of Rome. We have 3 assessed valuations here: $50,000, $100,000, and $150,000. And if you look at this current year versus next year's projected or proposed tax rate, you can see the difference in the tax rate, you can see the difference in the tax amounts, and you can see the reduction for the basic star, if you have basic star on your property, and that gives you the net taxable amount at the bottom of this chart. You can see on a $50,000 home, the difference year over year is $66. On a $100,000 home, the difference is $144. And on a $150,000 home, you can see the difference is $223 increased taxes for the year. In essence, if you do some quick math on a $100,000 assessed home, the proposed tax increase would equate to a $12 monthly increase on your school tax bill. Continuing with local contribution, the next slide talks a little bit about our tax on true. On this slide, this is the same districts that were in the per pupil expenditures earlier in the presentation. Here you can see Rome ranks letter F on this slide in all of Oneida County and the Mobosis. The reason why this is important is a few years ago we were letter C. So while we are having to increase taxes to maintain programs and staff for our students, regionally our tax on true rates are getting better relative to some of our other municipalities. We are improving relative to tax on true. So this shows again that although we do have to raise taxes at times, there are other communities that are raising taxes significantly higher, faster rates than Rome. This is a positive for our community that we continue to decrease our tax on true relative to our neighbors. In summing up our financials, if you look at this slide here, our current expenditure budget is $117,909,331. We are proposing a budget of $116,692,438, which is a slight decrease of 1% year over year. You can see the revenues are decreased by roughly 3%. The tax levy increase, which we just got done talking about, at 4.06%. If things, worst case scenario for next year, this budget's approved and we have to use the projected fund balance that we have in there right now. We have roughly $2.5 million of allocated fund balance for next year. We hope we don't have to use that money. If we don't use it, that helps our future significantly. But if we did use it, it would increase our usage by 22% over this year. And then at the bottom, it shows that we would have roughly $4.8 million left in the bank for the future as we start to plan, and that's kind of the number that we're concerned about. That number continues to decrease. So currently there is $2.5 million in reserves allocated for next year's in next year's budget in hopes that we don't have to actually use that, which will help the future dramatically. In closing today, summing up the budget, again, if we rolled everything over that we're currently doing into next year, the budget would be roughly $125 million. Our revenue, as you've heard and seen, overall is decreased. Within this current budget, there are restorations that include 30 teaching positions, our secondary clubs and activities, and modified sports. So that is one of the largest changes from a few weeks ago till today. There are several additional positions, as you can see, plus the reinstatement of clubs and activities and modified sports. 23 of the positions that we've talked about reducing are through attrition in this budget. The proposed reductions reduce our expenditures by roughly $7.4 million, which was mentioned earlier in the presentation. As everything stands today, if nothing changes, although things are always changing every day, but if they don't change, the projected deficit to start the 2020-2021 budget planning cycle is $4.5 million based on our proposed expenditures for next year and our estimated revenues for 2 years from now. That number is improved over the last presentation, and hopefully with some more reductions relative to possible retirements, that number could get better. Within the budget, there's still things that are desired. We know the community still values some things. These still desired items such as field trips, pre-K transportation, service contracts that we have with outside agencies, and obviously teaching positions are still possible to be reinstated. That's going to depend on some of the moving parts that I have listed below, such as retirements, resignations, or additional funding that might come from Albany in the form of what is called bullet aid. There is still money there that could be granted to the school district through the legislature or the governor. However, we don't have that information at this time, and that information could show up at any given point in time prior to the budget vote or after the budget vote well into the summer. We just don't know those things right now, which is why we consider them to be moving parts. There's some monies available that could reinstore some of these desired items, but we won't have that information till a later time. Something of importance is to talk about the contingency budget. If for some reason the budget were to be defeated and voted down, we could go out to a second vote in June. A contingency budget would take effect if the budget were not successful after 2 votes. Following that, it would require a 0% tax levy increase by law. A contingency budget does not allow us to raise the tax levy at all. If that were to happen, it could result in additional reductions of approximately $3 million from the proposed budget. Remember, if we go to a 0% tax levy, that means we have revenue that we have built into the budget to support our staff and programs. That money would have to come out of the revenue side, thus making a decrease in our overall operating budget. So a contingency budget would require significant more reductions in order to balance the budget. It's important to know a contingency budget does not restore any of the proposed reductions. Voting no on a school budget or voting yes on a school budget doesn't mean you agree with the items that are in it or out of it. You're voting on a number, an expenditure number that is being proposed to the community from the school district. So some people are under the impression that if they vote no on the budget, that means that the plans or the staff and the programs that are proposing to be reduced would be maintained, and that is not a factual statement. So a contingency budget does not restore any proposed reductions. In fact, it actually causes us to make more reductions in order to balance the budget under the contingency laws. And the other thing that's worthy of note is that a contingency budget for next year would result in a projected deficit to start next year's planning of approximately $6 million. So while we are improving and doing some things in a good way relative to looking to the future, a contingency budget would set us back slightly from where we currently stand for next year. In wrapping up here, there are Board of Education propositions on the budget vote in May. Currently, there's 3 positions available that take office July 1st of this year. All 3 positions are for a 3-year term. If you are interested in running for the Board of Education, you must submit a petition on or before May 1st of 2019 to the business office in the school district. A completed petition would include 100 qualified signatures, and those petitions are available at the district offices within the business office at 409 Bell Road. So if you're interested in running for the Board of Education, you have roughly a week and a half left to get that work done, 2 weeks left to get those signatures and get that petition submitted. This is something that I put in our presentation every year by law. The school district and the library levy are voted on at the same time. Fortunately, Jervis Public Library is not increasing their tax levy for this year, therefore there is no proposition to vote. However, if they were increasing their tax levy, there would be a separate proposition on the ballot for that. Fortunately, they are not looking to increase the levy for this year, but this is an education law that we're required to inform people, teach people about how that process works. Voting information happens on Tuesday, May 21st, 2019 from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. in our 10 different wards. This slide shows the different locations of where you can vote. If you have more information, please contact the district business office for more details and we can get that information to you. With that, I say thank you to everyone out there who has worked hard to understand the school budgeting process. This has not been an easy year for anybody. We certainly understand that and know that. Our hopes are that we can get through this one really tough year for a better future. I am hopeful that the hard work that our team has put in here and the time and effort spent in the community to learn and educate yourselves about school budgeting and understanding what's going on this year is really going to benefit us for the future. With that, I say thank you, and I ask you to please vote on May 21st to make sure that we can move forward in a positive and good manner here in Rome. Thank you and have a great day.